That's about it, though.
Well,
Yeah.
Okay, we are good.
all right. So, welcome to the Smoke Pit. This week we have Chris Bennet, who is a candidate in California District 3. And my name is Katie Torbach. I am the president of 5051 Veterans. Rory will introduce himself.
Hi, Rory, 5051 Vets Comms Director. Sorry, I was making sure we were uploaded. Comms Director. So, and then I'll pass that over to Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris Bennet. I'm an Army veteran, West Point graduate. I started out artillery and then went cyber before I got out in 2018. And as of April, when they started doing extrajudicial kidnappings in violation of due process in the Constitution, I quit my job to run for Congress in California's originally 6th district, but following the redistricting with Proposition 50 here in California in response to what Texas was doing, I moved over to the 3rd district. So, pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you on. So I do have a question because you worked in technology, correct?
Yes, yeah. So when I got out of the Army, my first job was at Kaiser Permanente, which was nonprofit healthcare IT. I was there for about 2 years, moved over to Sutter Health for another 2 years, and then I got a job at PwC Strategy and doing technology strategy. So it was like a lot of technology due diligences, which is a really boring way of saying like I help rich people shuffle their money around by looking at technology stacks, seeing if the way that they built their application platforms made sense, all that kind of stuff. So I was a nerd. I had a computer science degree. So that's the reason why.
Oh, okay, cool. All right. So myself and Rory are also Army vets. So we are going to recognize you as a ring tapper. That's what we call you as enlisted. And so let's get into it. So we saw this morning that U.S. forces carried out a major military operation in Venezuela, including airstrikes, and resulted in the capturing and kidnapping of President Nicolas Maduro from Venezuelan territory, with the intention of bringing him to the United States to face charges. So what's your thought on that?
I think it is horrible and a terrible precedent and should not have happened. And I consider pretty much everything that went down to be war crimes as a general rule. It's also a violation of international law. And it's deeply unsettling because if we can do it to Venezuela, who can't we do it to? That's really what it boils down to. So we've already been basically alienating every single one of our allies on the international stage. And now we're showing people that we're going to make stuff up about you, start bombing your people without any justification, and then we're going to use those bombings in order to then go in and invade you and do regime change on you. So I think it's a terrible precedent. It's deeply concerning. I am very worried about who is going to die because these things have a tendency to not stay nice, neat, and contained the way that we like them to. And I think that the soldiers and sailors and Marines and airmen who are involved are being used to do bad things, and I feel like they should be disobeying these unlawful orders, but I know that's a little bit more complicated than that. So that's kind of the broad strokes. I woke up this morning pretty early at like 5, and then I popped open my phone, to check my stuff, and I was like, oh, okay. War crimes and kidnapping of a sovereign leader. That's not a great start. I think the words that popped out of my head and onto my threads and Blue Sky was impeach, convict, remove, imprison is the bare minimum for every single war criminal doing regime change right now, and every single member of Congress and the Senate and the executive branch that are enabling it. So I think that's kind of where I stand on.
Yeah, I mean, we're members of the removal coalition, so we were in DC on 11/22, like on stage. So we're all about impeach, convict, remove, especially of Pete Hegseth, right? We like it is war crimes. It's really not debatable. If you look at international law, if you look at the Geneva Conventions, if you look at other standards, and
the rules of just warfare. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you being a West Point grad, they teach y'all more than they would teach me or Rory about what an unlawful and lawful order is. And so can you explain to us from like a graduate standpoint of West Point what a lawful and unlawful order is, and how what is happening is unlawful?
Yeah, so obviously it's a little bit more complicated than we wish it was, because generally speaking, the duty to disobey unlawful orders is something that's supposed to be determined at the officer level, because enlisted are generally supposed to just carry out what they're told to do, unless it's so blatant that it's clear that you're committing a war crime or something. But the big thing at West Point that they teach you about is the rules of just warfare. So that means jus ad bellum, jus ante bellum, and jus in bello, specifically like the rules of just warfare before you engage in conflict, while you're in conflict, and then after conflict. The big things is that you're not supposed to have preemptive strikes. That is basically just committing a war of aggression, and there is never a justification to do so. We also have things like proportionality. You're not supposed to go far beyond what is reasonable given the circumstances. So if, for example, someone blows up like a boat or something, that doesn't mean you can then nuke their capital, right? That's not proportional. There's also things that they teach us about international humanitarian law, like, for example, forced starvation, collective punishment, indiscriminate targeting of civilians and civilian infrastructure are all war crimes. Now, typically the way that this has worked is you would have JAG officers who would get the order that was given to commanders, and then they would say, yes, this is lawful, no, this is not lawful. And that was kind of how it was determined while we still had the rules-based order and more or less following the rule of law. Now, we still had situations where war crimes were being committed, or people were violating the Constitution, international law, but as a general rule, that's kind of how it worked for the last 35, 40 plus years or so, until obviously President Trump took power the second time around, because he did what every single fascist or authoritarian leader does. He purged the top levels of the military for anyone who wasn't going to put loyalty before competence and their duty to the Constitution. So as a result, they also got rid of all of the JAG officers, which means that they're basically flying blind and no one really knows what is or isn't lawful, or they're too afraid to ask, or they don't want to get fired, or what have you. So we're kind of in this Wild West right now where you have a bunch of people that are doing things at the behest of the president. And one of the problems that I think exists with the enlisted corps is that your oath includes loyalty to the president specifically in it, which means that a lot of people will ignore the first part, which is the more important part, the oath to the Constitution, and just go for, following the orders of the president. And that's something that we've been seeing where a lot of enlisted folks, now that all the senior officers that actually had common sense and professionalism and training are basically purged, you have all of the drunken majors who, normally would have gotten kicked out for committing rape or DUI or something, are now running the show. And those guys do not have any competence whatsoever. They have no morals, they have no ethics. And they're basically saying, all right, enlisted folk, it's your turn to go and blow up some civilian infrastructure, or blow up fishing boats, or go kidnap the president of a foreign country. So in my mind, like under normal circumstances, it's the JAG's job to decide if something is lawful or not. But these are unprecedented times. And one of the things that we saw in past conflicts, for example, the Vietnam War, was the My Lai massacre. And that was a situation where a helicopter pilot saw that American soldiers were effectively murdering civilians in a town that had no justification whatsoever, and he landed his helicopter and blocked them from doing so. Now, he received all kinds of hate, all kinds of backlash, and his life was effectively ruined for doing the right thing. And that's the kind of stuff that they would teach us in our professional military ethics and education training at West Point. Now, I don't know if they're still teaching it now because, they've been kind of purging everyone who is saying, we shouldn't do war crimes. But at least when I was there, that was something that they taught us. My little brother is actually a cadet there right now. So, I'll ask him the next time I talk to him whether or not they have that. He's a plebe, though, so that you don't get as much PME squared training while you're there. But in my mind, like right now, if you're being told that you should go bomb someone and there's no actual intelligence to justify it, then it's basically just extrajudicial killings, which is tantamount to war crimes, which means that you should be tried, convicted, and sent to prison if you do it. So I think that we're at a stage in our authoritarian fascist oligarchy takeover by President Trump and his cronies and the administration, where anyone who is just following orders they basically have a duty to disobey. And you may get thrown into the brig for it. It is going to be a personal sacrifice, but I think that that's something that we should all be calling on people to do, because otherwise you're going to be tried and convicted, and you're going to be complicit, and you're probably going to struggle to fall asleep at night for the rest of your life, because it's doing the terrible things that really causes the PTSD, in my opinion, more than almost anything else. Like, it's one thing to be in a firefight, it's another thing to be blowing up civilians and now trying to deal with that fact once you're finally out. So that's the long and short of it, I guess.
Yeah, we're actually going to dive into moral injury in this conversation.
Yeah.
So, like, as we talk about this and we talk about foreign policy, what principles should guide U.S. foreign policy when it comes to the use of military force? And,
Yeah.
Like, specifically, like what's going on right now, because we do know that Congress owns the power to put us at war. But after 9/11 and the Patriot Act, that changed a bit when you do operations, and people don't understand that. So when we're talking about law and how that works, is yes, Congress holds the power to put us at war, but after 9/11 and the Patriot Act, the rules changed a bit for the executive branch.
Yeah. So if I'm correct, the question was about the use of military force by the president unilaterally without congressional approval, and the ideal role of the American military when it comes to foreign policy. Is that right?
Yeah, like because as like if you're elected, right, you're a legislator, you're gonna write policy, and I'm a policy nerd. Just like you're a
Okay.
nerd, I am a policy nerd.
Nice. I gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it actually goes far before even 9/11. 9/11 really led to police state measures and surveillance activity here on American soil against American citizens. But we actually haven't declared a war since World War II, because Congress has effectively authorized the president to basically send troops anywhere he wants for 60 days or more, really. And in theory, all he needs is like a post hoc rubber stamp from Congress. So we've already had a situation where Congress has abdicated that actual power that they're supposed to control to the president for more than half a century. Now, when it comes to me as a legislator, my goal is to claw back every single congressional power that has ever been delegated to the president, because clearly putting so much power into the hands of the executive creates an unsustainable and disgusting abuse of power situation where, Donald Trump is uniquely terrible, but he is just a symptom of the system that we have allowed to fester. So we need to actually create a system that prevents those types of abuses from occurring in the first place. And that starts with Congress members actually doing their jobs. Because right now, they don't do their jobs. They spend all of their time on the phone, begging people for money, making shady backroom deals with each other, going on like talk shows and stuff in order to try to sell their books. But they're not actually doing their job. There's a reason why it feels like they always seem to go on vacation, because they've given so much of their stuff away to the executive branch that now they're effectively worthless. They have no job. And the only job that they should be doing right now is the power of impeachment, because every single violation of the Constitution is another tick against us when it comes to our ability to exist as a functioning democracy and a stable country. So that's sort of the broad strokes, I think, when it comes just from like a legislative perspective. But for in terms of foreign policy, now I think a lot of people would say we shouldn't even have a military, right? But I don't think that's the case. And mainly because we've done so much regime change and murdered so many people and killed so many people and created so many terrorists that we actually do need a military to defend ourselves. But I think that this is my hot take. We need to renationalize the military, period. I don't think that there should be a profit motive allowed to exist when it comes to starting wars and waging wars. Because at the end of the day, if you have private companies that make money from selling munitions and tanks and planes and battleships and whatnot, then you're always going to have a motive for people in these companies to buy off politicians to convince them to start wars, or they're going to try to get the president to do it. Now, ever since Donald Rumsfeld in the early 2000s with the Bush administration, basically more and more of our military functions have been outsourced to private defense contractors. And we have soldiers living in black mold infested barracks, living on food stamps, and then the Pentagon can't pass an audit, but we're spending like $800 for a single screw. And then we have a situation where a soldier can't even fix their own tank or their own MLRS system or what have you, because they have to call some contractor and have them come and do it for them. So I think that needs to end, and I think we need to basically get rid of the profit motive for the military. Now, from a foreign policy perspective, our goal should really just be to protect ourselves and to defend our allies from unjust warfare. We should never be committing unjust warfare ourselves. So that means no more genocide, no more war crimes, no more, preemptive strikes, no more post hoc rationalizations for why we did such things. We should really be involved more with the international community, and we should not be using our powers to effectively, bulldoze people and prop up our American business interests by replacing regimes, many of them democratic, with dictators who are sympathetic to us. I think that a lot of people say, it's important for geopolitics that we have to, be horrific monsters on the international stage, but I don't think that that's true. And when it comes to national security, the way that you create terrorists is by blowing up people's family members, their friends, their loved ones. If you stop doing that, you don't have to worry about terrorism anymore. That's the real war on terror. So hopefully I answered your question, but that's kind of where I'm coming from on it. Yeah.
Well, so I'm a little bit older than you. Not much, but a little bit. And we take a no more war period standpoint, right? We're a nation that's been at war for 230 plus years out of 250. I'm a fifth generation veteran in my family. And every generation has served during wartime. So it's a little bit much. And now I have children, and I would not like to see them in a war, because, the big wraparound of, VA care is at an all-time low in most veterans' perspectives.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. I got the flu a few weeks ago because when I went to the VA to get my flu shot, like I've done every single year since I got out in 2018, they said, you can't get it because you're not 65. Never happened before. They denied it. And it was very odd. Apparently, it was some guidance that came down from RFK Jr., the plague commander in chief. So, yeah. I have to say that my belief that we do need a military is based around the idea that all of our other systems are also functioning properly, like the VA, the ending the recruiting of refugees whose homes we destroyed, and targeting poor people who have no other form of social mobility. Like, I do think that there is a place for military service, but I don't think that we should be starting wars. And we definitely should not be in forever wars, and we should not be committing like drone strikes or murdering people because of whatever concocted reason that we have. Because like I said, if we're worried about our national security, if you stop murdering people, you have a lot less to worry about.
Yeah, I actually got in an argument today with my brother about being the world police, because I said we should not be, and he said we should be, and I asked him why. And just like I said, we're no more war period. There is a place for the military, right?
Yes. But no, we should not be the world police. Absolutely not.
No, we shouldn't. And I believe in the America First agenda. And what that means to me is like we reinvest our money into our people, our infrastructure, our education, our healthcare system, because we are, I'm a fiscal conservative. And so we are broke. War is expensive. We have better things to spend money on.
So I have some thoughts on that. So fiscal conservatism only makes sense at the state and local level because the federal government can print money, obviously. That's the whole federal government's job. I agree with you, though. We should not be the world police. And I don't believe in America first. I believe in Americans first. It's the people. Because like America first, you can define America however you want, but when you say Americans, it's a lot harder to screw it into something disgusting, right? So
that's true. I like that.
Yeah, Americans first, absolutely. But yeah, I think we should be using our money to help people here at home instead of hurting them abroad. 100%. I'm 100% in agreement with that.
Yeah, we're anti-genocide, 100% around here.
What a lovely bar to clear.
Yeah. we should reinvest our money, but let's talk about like veterans for a second. So I am, I might have to educate you a little bit, but maybe not since you are a West Point grad. So the Ferris Doctrine. All right. I am an MST survivor. I am very open about that. In the U.S., civilians generally have legal recourse when harmed by government negligence. And it's negligent if you look at the statistics for MST currently and over the past 6 generations. And I'm not talking about women specifically, because more men are sexually assaulted in the military than women. But women generally have taken that burden on their shoulders to try and fix the policy surrounding it. One of the things is the negligence of the government in regard to MST specifically. And MST, for those watching, is military sexual trauma. I was a part of an effort in 2020 after the murder of Vanessa Guillen, of women veterans around the country that wanted to change policy. And we stood up protests. We had people on the Hill testifying, and it was the first time in this country that women veterans protested our treatment ever. And we got portions of the Vanessa Guillen Act passed in the 2021 NDAA. So this is a 2-pronged question. Mm-hmm. The Ferris Doctrine is a restriction on active duty personnel or anybody that works for the government from suing the government for negligence. In 2020, we were able to overturn a portion of the Ferris Doctrine, and now we can sue the VA for medical negligence. But there is another portion that still stands. You cannot sue the government for negligence. It's our belief, not only as sexual assault survivors of the military, that this needs to be changed. Policy needs to be changed where the government can be held accountable for the lack of adherence to its own policies, the lack of kicking out convicted rapists, letting people retire with full benefits and pay.
Letting lieutenant colonels get with lieutenants, like happened in my battalion when I was a lieutenant.
So the question is, so the Ferris Doctrine needs to be overturned for negligence, but it's not just for sexual assault survivors. It's for training accidents as well.
There's it's all forms of negligence as long as it was from other members of the military who were at fault for negligence, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. There was also a Supreme Court case recently. I don't know if you're that big of a nerd. I am. Where I listened to the oral argument.
Okay, no, you're a bigger nerd than me. I'm sorry.
They are trying to extend the Ferris Doctrine over contractors now.
Yeah, no, the whole concept of the Ferris Doctrine in my mind is just a way to evade accountability. The one thing that the government has been failing at just about every single level is accountability. Police officers are not accountable. The military is not accountable. The executive branch is not accountable. We have a situation where basically people can act with impunity, and we're just hoping that they happen to be a good one. And that's a terrible method for our system to exist, right? If your experience is based on getting lucky with the people who happen to have power over you, then that's a broken system and it needs to be changed. So I definitely feel like we need to overturn the Ferris Doctrine, because if there is negligence that's being done by the military to the military, then that's on the executive branch, and they should be able to make people whole. It shouldn't be a situation where it's like, hey, sorry that we didn't do anything to stop these horrible things from happening to you, and also screw you. It doesn't make any sense. So that's something that we need to do.
The biggest fuck you to women veterans ever, let me tell you. Vanessa Guillen was murdered on Fort Hood. I'm a survivor of Fort Hood. I went to Fort Hood. And instead of doing the right thing, they renamed a gate after her. So it was like, sorry, you got murdered.
Yeah.
But here's your gate. So it
and was also we're renaming all the bases back to the Confederate generals too. Yeah.
Yeah. But so the other parts of this is due to the rollback of DEI in the military. every protection that we fought for in 2020 and every protection that women veterans have been fighting for since the 60s has been rolled back because we're women, although more males are sexually assaulted in the military. So will you commit, if you are elected, to stand with survivors if a piece of legislation is to put all of those protections back in place?
Yes, but I'm not going to stand with survivors. I'm going to be leading the charge. I mean, I think it's ridiculous, you know.
I would
It
hope
shouldn't. It's basically Pete Hegseth is everything that is toxic and wrong with the officer corps from even when I was in the military, right? And all of the shit that he flew every single general and admiral from around the world back to lecture them about was basically saying we're going to undo 50 plus years of progress. You know, we're bringing back hazing. We want to bring back deaths. We want to make sure that anything that made it so that we were actually a professional military force goes back to the before times, which is terrible and wrong and disgusting. So 100%, I will stand with survivors, and I will also try to prevent future survivors because you know it's a lot better to prevent it on the front end than the back end.
I saw a video recently, and I'll have to do a lot more research into this before I say it's true or not, is that due to the policies that we put into place, that more false reports and people getting arrested happened. But I'm not exactly sure the validity of that, but it was a weird argument. What our protections was, and you are an officer, so taking it out of the chain of command because of the good old boy system and putting it in a third party away from the chain of command. And that makes it a lot accountability easier, but retaliation is still real. We helped a young soldier on Fort Hood recently because Fort Hood is still a shit show. Shit doesn't change. So let's talk about accountability, right? Because when that happened, I don't know if you know the story, but the commanding general was moved to another post and got to keep the same level. And so when we talk about accountability, it is firing people and removing them from the military. So how would you approach strengthening accountability for government institutions while also avoiding unintended harm to mission critical operations?
Yeah. Interesting question. I think the big thing with accountability is that the higher up you go, the more you should be held to the highest standard. And we always see that it's actually the opposite. So, you know, we will chew out a private for not being right place, right time, right uniform, but then we give a general officer a slap on the wrist for, you know, doing sexual assault or who knows what. And that's exactly the opposite. It should be a situation where the lower rank you are, the more leeway you get, with you know the exception of you don't get leeway for doing sexual assault or murder or what have you. But our people at the highest level should be held to the highest standard, and that just has not been the case ever. Maybe I don't know, but that's really what it boils down to. And when it comes down to like good order and discipline and mission critical systems and mission critical capabilities. If your general officers can't keep it in their pants, then that's a them problem. It's not a mission critical problem. So I think we need to hold them to the highest standard possible. We should not be giving them slaps on the wrist. We should be holding them to a higher standard than we expect anyone else to follow. And if they fail at that standard, then they should be replaced. And I don't care if it's like, this operation might suffer. That's the fault of the general officer or the high ranking officer who decided to do misconduct. And that's what accountability is. It's not just saying like, oh, I'm overall responsible, but you know, I get some perks here and there, which means that I don't have to follow the same rules that everyone else does. It's the same problem that we have with the executive branch. The president is completely unaccountable because the only people who can actually hold him accountable from an actual powers perspective is Congress. And the majority of members of Congress on both sides of the political aisle are effectively bought and paid for by the exact same private, ultra-wealthy interests and billionaires. And the result is that the Republicans don't do shit. They avoid every single town hall. They don't answer their constituents, and they just gaslight all of us. And then the Democrats say, oh, we have no power. We can't do anything. You know, once we get power back, then we can hold them accountable. But it's all BS. It's all theater. we basically have a uniparty system when it comes to serving the interests of billionaires and the ultra wealthy and giant corporations. And the end result is that no one is being held accountable. In fact, the only people who are being held accountable typically are women and low-ranking people. That's why, for example, Jeffrey Epstein had, I think it was like at least 10 different co-conspirators, and the only one who actually served prison time was Ghislaine Maxwell, and she was the only woman, right? And we saw the same thing with Hillary Clinton, where she did stupid, terrible stuff, but she got infinitely more hatred from everyone than Bill Clinton ever did, even though Bill Clinton did much worse things, right? And he was also a frequent guest of Jeffrey Epstein. So like when it comes down to it, like we actually need to have real accountability, and that means that we need to hold our leaders to the highest standard, not the lowest one. So yeah.
And I agree, right? As someone that led women veterans around the country doing this.
Thank you for your service, by the way.
Oh,
and I mean that for that part, not whatever you were doing when you were in.
So it's one of those things, right? As a survivor, I have 2 daughters. And I would love for them to serve. On the no more wars perspective, but more so as the military. I am going to make a bold statement, and it is not going to be as the president of 5051 vets. This is just as a woman veteran. The military is not a safe place for women. It hasn't been for a very long time. We only make up 15% of the force. And so I am not advocating for women to not be in the military, not by any means. I think that more women need to be in positions of power. And the problem is we had 2 very qualified women who sat on the Joint Chiefs, and they were both fired for being women. And then we saw our history deleted. Actually, my vice president, she's in a meeting and couldn't make it, but she is a 404 veteran. Her small piece of history got deleted. And it's women in general have bore the burden of trying to get policy changed. And you see it in a lot of activism spaces in general, it's mostly women. Sorry, Rory.
I have also noticed that in political spaces. Honestly, the majority of my supporters are women.
Right, but women now serve in all roles, of the military, including combat positions.
Yeah, some of my classmates are women with Ranger tabs now. They're more badass than me.
You know what I'm saying? But debates still continue about policy, readiness, and support structures regarding women. So what principles do you think should guide federal policy on gender equity in the military?
Gender equity in the military, what policies? I mean, the biggest thing is that if you can do the job, it doesn't matter what your gender is, right? That's just the first and foremost. It's common sense. If you're creating arbitrary gender requirements because of a job description that are not related to the job, it makes zero sense. And the only job description I could think of where gender is important is, for example, if you're in like a Middle Eastern country or something where, you need women to be talking to women, right? Like that's the only situation where it maybe makes sense. But even then,
teams?
Like what?
FET teams, female engagement teams?
Exactly, like female engagement teams, right? But pretty much everything else, doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I think one of the big things is that we tend to put the onus on women to solve the problems that women face that are caused by men acting poorly. And so what it really boils down to is that men need to step up and actually be better, rather than it being that women somehow need to advocate for themselves, defend themselves, try to fight for themselves after the fact, and do all these other things, and then justify their existence, because it's bullshit. Like my mom was a West Point graduate. She was the class of '88. My father was also a West Point graduate, also class of '88. My stepdad was a West Point graduate, class of '84. So like women have been in the military since before I was born. I'm 35 years old now. I was born in 1990. my mom was an Army officer. She was air defense artillery, combat arms. So like women have been able to do the job for half a century almost at this point. I think the first class of women at West Point was 1976. And even before that, we had women serving as nurses, for example. They were still in the military all the way back before World War II, I think. So like, it's just a continuous reactionary BS situation where we're always making women have to justify themselves and defend themselves and stand up for themselves. And really, it's just a way to try and control their bodies at the end of the day. It really just comes down to men wanting to control women's bodies. So really, like, I mean, I think DEI is great. You know, like, it's like a dirty word because some conservative activist asshole decided to redefine it to mean anything black or anything LGBTQ friendly or anything that might be friendly towards women. But what DEI originally was to prevent unlawful discrimination, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like that was the overall purpose. Back in my day in the Army, we had SHARP and EEO people, yes. Right? Like your whole job was like, make sure that you can respond to sexual harassment or assault, make sure that you can respond to equal opportunity situations. Actually, when I was in during President Trump's first term, and I gave transgender training because it's not hard to talk to people like they're human beings and treat them how they want to be treated, right? So like equity, it really boils down to holding people to a higher standard and not letting some people basically get away with being dirtbags and then forcing other people to make up for it when they're the victims, right? So, I mean, that's really what we need across the board from an equity perspective. We just need people to actually be good human beings, and we need to stop putting it on the victims to try and fix things.
And I know Rory served during that, I believe during the same time frame as you. And so my next question was going to be about transgender service members because you served during that. I got out in 2014. So the policy didn't take effect until 2016. Yeah. But I served for the changeover of DADT. Mm-hmm. And you saw the policy expand, right? Is like, now you can be LGBT openly in the military.
Yep.
Now transgender people can serve.
Yeah, I have transgender friends and classmates who are still serving right now.
And then we saw the policy change in Trump's first term of if you're in, but we're not going to let you join. And then Biden took office. And then it was transgender people can join the military. And now Trump is back in office. Transgender service members are being kicked out. And we know quite a few. And so my question to you is, the military generally, and people don't realize this, has been a place for societal experiments. Yeah. And what I mean by that is we are a microcosm of the larger society. And when you look at the desegregation of the military, it happened before larger society. When you look at DADT, it happened before federal law changed. And so when other veterans, and it's generally one demographic of veteran who did not serve in a time frame where transgender people served openly, I would like to see legislators like yourself who are elected to codify or like change it to where policy cannot change with every president, because using people as political tools and pawns, especially the military and veterans, because we see our veteran trans brothers and sisters not getting care at the VA any longer, not getting HRT, while men get their testosterone and women can get estrogen, but trans service members cannot get HRT. And we have like this myriad of issues. So my larger question to you is, will you help codify this so that it is not changed every 4 years? Because as veterans, we know, hey, we're trying to do a career of 20 years and retire and serve our country and make this, a lifelong thing. But if we're going in 4-year fucking segments, like you got to hope for two good presidents, that run for, two terms consecutively.
So yes, obviously I will fight for that, but we need systemic change. Period. One of the biggest reasons why our system is so screwed up is because we are victims of our own success. The Constitution was written before proportional representation was invented. And as a result, we're stuck with this first past the post system where everything effectively boils down to a false binary where you have to pick red versus blue, Democrat versus Republican, yes versus no. But things are more complicated than that. And because of that, we have this endless gridlock where we end up with a two-party system that makes it so that nothing ever gets passed because we're so diametrically opposed, because that's sort of like the Nash equilibrium of it all, which is like a game theory term for like the most likely optimal end state for the given situation, right? So when it comes to the presidents, because it's so difficult to pass any kind of legislation because we only have two parties within our system, that means that presidents effectively govern by executive order. And because the Constitution says that the president's the commander-in-chief and is in charge of the executive branch, that means that he basically can just do whatever he wants. So I think it'll actually require a constitutional amendment for that particular change. But I do think that there are laws that we can pass from a legislative perspective that can also get us closer to that point until we can have some of those broader systemic reforms. But absolutely, we definitely need to stop having a situation where all of our treaties, all of our regulations, all of our policies can basically just be like thrown into the garbage can because the next guy gets elected, especially when that next guy is basically trying to bring about the four horsemen of the apocalypse. So that's something that we definitely need to change.
So I do know that legislation can be passed,
yes.
Right? It's how women join the military.
Yep.
Is the Women Army Corps was created, and then women joined.
Yeah.
So you are correct and people don't know this generally as a policy perspective, but I am such a policy nerd, is that normally Congress writes law, and then that's how that happens. But what's happening is the executive branch is putting out executive orders and then directing Congress to codify the executive order. And
which means what exactly is Congress doing? What is their actual job? Right? Yeah.
Correct. And so I would like to see it codified, like women was like, because I feel like legislators are not doing their jobs, like you are saying, of not writing enough policy to put things into place. And we could have kept abortion if they would have codified it.
We could have codified it 3 times, and the reason that they didn't was because they wanted to keep women scared and voting Democrat, period.
Yeah. So, and I also think that, like talking about the Constitution, we're a very big constitutional group.
I am a constitutional nerd for sure.
Oh, good. Let's go over some things, right?
Oh wait, don't check me on my statement just now. But yeah,
I am here for it. So, when we talk about impeachment, right, and we talked about it earlier, the impeach, convict, remove.
Imprison is the last step.
Yes.
But yeah, go on.
So we as a group know that Tom Homan can be, by the Constitution, for bribery, he can absolutely be impeached because it's been proven without a shadow of a doubt that he took a bribe of $50,000. So that's number one.
Like a brown bag or something, right?
Right. And then number 2, we talked about Pete Hegseth because he is like what he is doing is war crimes.
Yep, the double tap war crimes. Yep.
That is considered a high crime under the U.S. Code if you look at them, like I do. So that's number 2. And then Kristi Noem for her Gestapo.
Yeah, murdering her puppies and obviously doing all the Gestapo shit for sure.
I mean, unfortunately, the puppies is not considered a high crime.
Well, it should be, in my opinion.
It's not from a legal standpoint, but so if you are elected, will you commit to? Because we have seen Representative Al Green; he has repetitively tried to impeach Donald Trump, and now we have seen Sri Thander try to impeach Pete Hegseth. And that effort is growing if you look at the first vote on Donald Trump to the second vote and then the Pete Hegseth vote. And so will you commit to at least voting to send it to the Senate?
Yes. I mean, my belief is that what we need to flip every red seat blue that we can. We need to get rid of every single corporate, centrist, moderate establishment Democrat that we can. We need to impeach the entire executive branch. We need to send them all to prison. We need to undo all the damage that they did. We need to amend the Constitution. Then we need to pass laws that actually fix people's lives and help people here. That's my like 7-point plan, I guess you could call it. But yeah, absolutely. I am in favor of impeaching every single, can I say the F word? Is that allowed? I don't know. Every single one of these people who have supported the horrific war crimes and the violations of the Constitution, violations of due process, violations of basic human rights. Every single one of them needs to be impeached and sent to prison, period. And we also need to end the president's ability to do unilateral pardons as well, because that is also extremely corrupt. Like now it's like, oh, as long as you have $200,000, you can buy a bribe from the president, right? So 100% impeachment all the way.
One of the things we talked about was constitutional amendments,
Yes.
right?
Oh, there's many that I want to do. Yeah.
Oh, good. We can talk about them because
Yep.
we have a few too.
Yeah.
So we talk about term limits, and when people, run on platform of term limits of like they're gonna, vote for term limits. Well, it can't be done through legislation. The Supreme Court has ruled in a case that term limits are unconstitutional because it usurps the will of the people written into the Constitution. And I mean, the opinion, it's a good opinion. I'm a constitutional conservative. It's a good opinion. What can be done? 2 separate actions. Number one, it can be written into the RNC or the DNC charter.
So the problem with the RNC and the DNC charter is that political parties in the United States have almost no power. In order for me to get elected, I don't need the RNC or the DNC to support me. If I can get enough people to vote for me, it doesn't actually matter what they want. And that's because of our first past the post system. Now, I agree the RNC and DNC in theory could have that kind of power, but the only way for that to work is if we're voting for parties instead of positions. Because if you don't do that, then it's not going to work. Like the RNC and DNC can do whatever they want, but Democrats like Ami Bera, who's one of my opponents, he voted to censure Al Green for defending Medicaid. He voted for Charlie Kirk Day. He votes for all kinds of terrible things, pisses off all the Democrats. The best that they can do is deny him an endorsement, and that doesn't do anything. So I do think that term limits can be useful and that they probably should be in effect. But until the political parties here actually have power, that doesn't really do anything. But we've seen it worse with the Democrats, though, because there's a Wikipedia article called something like members of Congress who have died in office since the 2020s. And if you look since 2022, the last 8 or 9 who have died, congressmen and senators, every single one of them was a Democrat. And so when you have that situation, you're basically, it's proof that they're not doing succession management. And it's because the Democratic Party, for example, has what I like to call hermit crab politics. Have you ever seen a video of like hermit crabs when they're swapping shells?
No.
So basically what hermit crabs do is one of them will find a big shell, and then they'll basically let all the other hermit crabs know, and then they'll all get in a line based on size, and then the biggest hermit crab will then swap to a bigger shell, and then everyone moves up one at a time. And that's how democratic politics works for the Democratic Party in this country right now. And that's terrible for a lot of different reasons. One of them being that in order for you to become a congressman, you basically have to be pushing 70 years old, right? Because you have to check all these boxes, you have to pay all your dues, et cetera. But at the end of the day, now you have a situation where you could die in office of old age or cancer or what have you at any time. So I think term limits in theory are great, but they also punish progressives, unfortunately. So that's one of the problems with term limits, because it is extremely easy to find an unscrupulous person who's willing to kowtow to wealthy private business interests compared to finding someone who is principled, stands for progress, and actually wants to help ordinary people, right? So until we can actually fix that problem of money in politics, term limits is going to be detrimental to us when it comes to trying to achieve generational, transformational, systemic change. So that's something that, I do think term limits, they make sense and they should be somehow enforced within the parties. But I feel like the parties are structured in such a way that they just can't have that kind of power, which is a problem. But I'd love to know, what is the other thing that you're talking about, though, besides the actual party system?
A constitutional amendment for term limits.
Okay, well, that might be good, but I think we have to get rid of money in politics first. Like, that has to happen first, then we do term limits. Yeah, we're getting close. Citizens United's looking pretty dicey these days.
Right. So we are in partnership with Money Out of Politics. We stand against large corporate PAC money. You have avowed to not take a PAC money or corporate PAC money, or
federal lobbyist money. Yep.
We're going to get to lobbying too, because lobbying needs to change. But have you taken the Money Out of Politics pledge?
Is that the one through Wolfpack? I've taken at least one or two, but I don't think I've taken the Money Out of Politics, if that's an organization one yet. But yeah, I'm 100% aligned. So
yeah,
I have another pledge to take. There's like so many pledges to take.
Yeah, so they're a partner of ours, and it's basically like not taking large funding and things of that nature, because money has ruined politics. But term limits are necessary. We have talked about it in a group. When we do smoke pits, sometimes we just get on as our group and we talk about policy openly with each other, coming from very different ideological standpoints, because we are a nonpartisan group. And term limits is something that we all discussed, because although I understand the idea of the progressive agenda not being able to be complete, I also think on the flip side of that is the Republican agenda, which I grew up conservative in a conservative household. The Republican agenda that we see today, Project 2025, is not just 10 years old. They started this agenda in 1964 after the passing of the Civil Rights Act, and they started it from bottom-up legislation. And it could have been stopped by term limits. And because there was no, like, when we talk about continuity of policy, right? If you think of the long-term agenda, such as the progressive agenda, right? Think of the flip side, play devil's advocate. We see the fruits of term limits not being in effect right now because of the policy that has been from bottom-up legislation, right? They took over the school boards, then they took over the city councils, then they took over the state, then they took over, and that's
I have a question for you, if I could interrupt. What do you think is more important, term limits or mandatory retirement ages?
Oh man, we talked about this. Rory, I'd love to hear your opinion, because we thought about an age limit as well. We did. And then we couldn't really agree on an age. But I come from a family of FBI agents that have mandatory retirement at 55.
Yeah. I mean, the way that our system is structured, it makes it very hard, I think, because unless you are, trying to run for office during a fascist authoritarian takeover right now, like I am, you're probably not going to have a chance unless you are pushing 60 already. So it definitely makes it hard. But yeah, I'd love to know your thoughts on that, Rory.
I don't, funnily enough, I don't agree with you. And this is why, because I brought this up in our general chat the other day. When you look at before I say what I'm about to say, let me be very clear. Like, I am not calling for a coup. What I am saying is this year, around the world, when you look at governments that were overthrown, they were overthrown by Gen Z and Gen Alpha. It was predominantly 18 to 25-year-olds around the world who lived in a system that they were suppressed by the oligarchy. Everybody was getting, like, the wealthy was getting wealthy, the poor was getting poor. There was no economic growth. Their generation could not get a job, could not buy a house, had no health care. And so I think right now is the time in history for young people to run. And
That's why I'm running.
Yeah,
I agree with you. Yeah.
we need that. So I just don't think that the 60 age thing it would have been relevant 10 years ago. But now when you look at the voting population, the largest voting population in this country is no longer the boomers, it's the millennials.
I know. I am a millennial. My generation, I was born in 1990. We are the largest generation and the most well-educated generation in American history.
Yep.
And we're also, yeah. So we're also one of the first generation that's worse off than our parents were before us. So
interestingly, Rory, are you a millennial?
I think so.
what year were you born?
I'm 98.
Yeah, you're a millennial. Yep. Well, you technically could be considered a zillennial, but once you start getting into that situation, it's like.
But both of my brothers are like, my middle brother's 34, and my oldest brother, I think, is 39 or some shit.
Yeah, so, I think you're probably more millennial than Gen Z.
I grew up with them, so.
Yeah. Did you watch Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z? That's the question.
I watched all of it.
Okay, so yeah, you're a millennial. Then.
All the way down to the History Channel.
Nice. Yeah, best I can do is $5, right? Pawn Stars.
Rory, what's your take on age limits in Congress and term limits? Because I know we talked about it as a group pretty in depth.
My thought process on that is, at some point, the decisions you're making are no longer going to affect you. So why are you deciding my future?
Yeah.
And also, if you can't even send an email without assistance, that's kind of a problem, right?
Granted, I mean, I can't even send an email without assistance sometimes. Let's be real, but
yeah. Well, I mean, but we have. So I mean, it really just goes to the problem of our political system in general, right? The fact that you win a popularity contest and now you can decide what medical procedures are allowed, for example, right? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I mean, like, part of that can be solved in theory, partially by term limits, but really, you almost need to have some form of technocracy when it comes to who is allowed to make certain decisions when it comes to science-based situations, right? Like, I don't know, I haven't thought too much about how to resolve that particular problem, but if you want to learn how to do better medical care, you don't go to a politician, you go to a doctor, you go to a researcher, you go to someone who actually has expertise in that thing, right? Now, in theory, a politician can be helpful if they're willing to actually listen to those people, but there's nothing that requires a politician to listen to anyone. And that's sort of the problem. Like, term limits could solve it in theory, but like I said before, if we still have money in politics, term limits is not a problem. It's always easy to find another unscrupulous person who's willing to do the bidding of billionaires or private corporate interests, because there's always going to be climbers. There's always going to be people who are willing to sell out the people that they're supposed to care for, right? So I think that term limits is great in theory, but what is the right amount of time? Like, how many terms is the right amount of terms to actually get rid of someone? Like, for me personally, I don't want to spend more than 15 years in Congress personally, but it gets really sticky once you look at the actual problems that we're facing right now.
I think a generation, right?
Yeah, like 20 years. I think that's reasonable.
I mean,
make it be like a normal career.
Rory spoke to it, right? I don't want people making laws that they don't have to live through.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the situation for like 90% of members of Congress right now.
And that's what we were speaking to, like, because your original question to me is like, what's more important, term limits or age?
Yeah.
I think it might be age, just because, like, when you are not, how can I say this?
Here, it's age for me, and it's because I'm sorry for all the older people that are watching, but at some point you're no longer making decisions on your future.
I think you're making it for your family's future,
and that's
future,
why I think
a certain age. But there is I'm 38, right? Like, so I'm not old at all.
Yeah, you are. You're old as fuck.
But there are plenty of things that 16 to 18-year-old kids, like, I have no clue what they're talking about.
Like
No
this
Riz.
weird 6'7" thing that
Yeah.
is
So
going
6'7's easy. It's just something that's silly. It doesn't mean anything. That's all it is.
Oh.
You know. Yeah. But there are certain ones where it's like, I'm gonna need to pull out Urban Dictionary or get a translator or something, you know.
But there
I
are.
remember when swag was the word.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But-
When I was in high school, it was filthy. You know, like, oh, that's
Oh,
filthy.
yeah.
Right? You remember?
Yeah. But I think that there's an importance of staying connected, right? So, like, when we did all of our MST work in 2020, we ran parallel to a group of active duty women that were dealing with MST, like, in the moment, because we were heavily involved in writing the Vanessa Guillen Act, and I had been out for 6 years at that point, and so I wasn't up to date as to what was going on in the military. And it's kind of like now, like, we are big policy people, like our group, we want to change policy to benefit veterans and their families and mil spouses, and I mean the larger public as well. But there's plenty of things that I have now been out over 10 years, 11. And so I don't know exactly what the younger generation needs. And Rory got out a lot later than I did. And, you know, like, I don't know what his generation needs that my generation doesn't. And that's the thing of trying to stay connected in the age gap.
Yeah, I mean, that in my mind, that's really a question of representation, though.
Yeah.
As in, you're supposed to represent the people that you serve. The problem is not age. The problem is not listening to the people that are actually facing the problems, right? Because what you just described there was you actually talk to people that are in it right now, that are going through it right now. That is what representatives are supposed to be doing. You're supposed to actually collect the issues, understand the problems that the people you represent are facing, and then you're supposed to take action to address those concerns based off of what those people say that they need, what the evidence says, what the laws are, what the structures are, the systems, et cetera. Like, I mean, I think that, you know, age and term limits are, you know, they're sticky things to talk about, but I think that they're generally probably a good thing overall. But even without those things, you can solve these problems if you just listen to people. Like, that's your job as a representative. You're supposed to represent. So, you know, I mean, that's what I plan to do, obviously, and I will, you know, I think 20 years is a reasonable amount of time. I think if you can't accomplish your objectives in 20 years, then you probably, you know, maybe you're fighting against a corrupt system, or maybe you're not very good at your job, one or the other, right?
Yeah. And I mean, talking about rebuilding trust, right?
Yeah.
There are people on both sides of the aisle that are extremely distrustful of the government and everybody that works in it, for good reason. And you said it earlier, you know, there is no accountability to ensure that your elected official is listening to the people.
Yep.
And so what concrete steps would you take as an elected official to rebuild trust through transparency, oversight, and responsiveness to constituents?
Transparency, oversight, and responsiveness to constituents. I mean, I think the big thing is that I have to practice what I preach, right? You cannot be a good representative if you believe you are special or held to a different standard than the people that you're supposed to represent. So it really starts with us in our own personal conduct. And that's the reason why I'm so transparent on all of my policy platform positions, right? You know, like most of these members of Congress or these candidates, you go to their website and you're like, okay, I think I know what they stand for some of these things, but for the most part, it's kind of a question mark, right? Like, if you go to one of my opponents and you go to healthcare, it just says, I was a doctor. Like, that's their platform. There's nothing there besides the fact that they were a doctor, right? So you need to say what you actually mean. You need to stop doing the political BS where it's like, I'm going to do some word salad. I'm going to try to confuse you into thinking I said something profound that was technically meaningless. And I need to speak in a language that you can actually understand. Because when it comes down to it, if you're trying to obfuscate what you believe because you're being paid by some evil fucking billionaire to do something terrible to your constituents, then you're not going to get trust no matter how nicely you word it. So we need to be simple about what we actually believe. We need to communicate clearly and effectively. We need to actually be principled in our stances, and we need to hold ourselves to the highest standard. And then we need, once more, enough people like me can get into office who, our form of neurodivergence is sincerity in trying to do things the right way, for example. Then we actually need to make it so that our structures enforce those mechanisms. Because right now it's on the honor system, right? Scouts honor kind of situation. Like I was a Boy Scout, but there's a lot of Boy Scouts out there who have gone on to be war criminals, for example. And also the Boy Scouts are known for doing all kinds of bad stuff in the leadership positions and whatnot, right? But if one, like I said before, if your system of accountability or your system of governance or what have you depends on getting lucky with who happens to be in charge, then that's a broken system and it needs to be changed. So we do need, more paragons of virtue like myself and yourself, obviously, to actually get enough political power to make those systemic changes. But that's really what it boils down to. And from, the political perspective, we have to actually represent the people. If you talk to most of these representatives, it's like trying to squeeze blood from a stone, getting anything interesting or meaningful out of them. They're not real human beings almost. That's what it feels like. Like they've been so corporatized and consultant speakified, where it's like you don't even know what the hell they're trying to say. And whenever they do say something, it's the most meaningless, milquetoast, watered down message possible. And that's another thing when it comes to messaging. You can't talk about what you think you can compromise yourself down to. You need to talk about what you actually intend to accomplish, the ideal gold standard for what you want to do. And that's one of the big things for me. That's why all of my stuff is extremely bold. And it's like, well, you're not going to be able to accomplish that as a similar representative. It's like, well, that's not how this works, right? It's a statement of values. It's what I want to accomplish. And that means that you know what I'm going to try to achieve and get as close to no matter what. And at the end of the day, if I can die knowing I accomplished most of it or all of it, then I'll be happy. Or if I at least left things better off than they were before. But, you're not going to build trust if when it comes down to it, it's like, I think I'm going to sell out the land that your family has owned for generations so that we can do like a data center to make AI slop for Elon Musk or something, right? Like you actually have to stand for the American people and your constituents. So that's a very long roundabout answer, but hopefully you got the gist.
Well, I mean, I think one of the important things is the educational piece, right? So
Yes.
I, of course, scoured your website.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And read a bunch of a lot of your stuff weirdly is on Reddit.
Yep.
Did you know? Yeah.
I'm a Redditor. Yeah. Actually,
a lot of veterans are Redditors. So
yeah.
I
yeah, we all have the same brain damage after all.
I actually looked at a lot of your stuff on Reddit. And so we align on a lot of things, like what our group has talked about as like when we talk about healthcare and things of that nature. So when we talk about veteran healthcare, right? Like you use the VA, I use the VA, Rory uses the VA, but we see what's happening through policy, right?
Yeah.
And you see, like you spoke to it, right? Is politicians are not really politicianing. Like we pay them to legislate, and they're not doing that.
And they just get their lobbyist friend to write it for them. They stamp their name at the bottom. They haven't even read it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so one of the as veterans, we look at our disability benefits being talked about in Senate Veteran Affairs committees. We look at it's a literal crisis at the Veterans Crisis Line with as many people as they have fired. We are now tracking over 10 veterans killing themselves in VA parking lots this year. And it's not being talked about enough, right? And I was hospitalized earlier this year for something very minor, but it was in a rural VA hospital that I choose to go to. I live in a large city. I live in Jacksonville, but I choose to drive to this rural VA that I've gone to for a very long time. And the funding there is being drawn out and given to a larger VA system right down the road. And so rural VAs are at risk. And
every rural hospital. Yep.
Yeah. And you talk about, healthcare for all. And we're here.
Single payer universal health care for all.
Yes. and we're here for that, right?
Yeah.
But I always ask the same question is how does that work with the VA specialized healthcare system?
Yeah, that's an easy question because the answer is that you keep the VA, but you also have Medicare for all. And the reason why is because the problems that military veterans face are different from the problems that most people in the civilian world face, right? Like we have to worry about toxic exposures, we have to worry about burn pits, we have to worry about bullet wounds, all kinds of things that they're just not very common when it comes to the civilian workforce, right? But the funding should just be from the same pool of funding as Medicare for all. It doesn't make sense to have separate systems because having that stratification of medical care effectively makes it so it's easier to sell out certain groups of the population. So for example, we saw it with Medicaid, where the president used SNAP and hunger as a weapon against Democrats in order to cut 20 million people from Medicaid. And the reason they're able to do that is because Medicaid is only poor people who have no political power and can't buy off their politicians, right? So you have everyone on a single payer system. That means that everyone has to use the same system, which means that you can't sell out any particular group of people. But when it comes to veterans, we have different problems than those people face. And you deserve to have the right kind of treatment so that you're not trying to explain yourself to someone who has no idea what you went through and is not trained to actually address your concerns. So that's really where I stand on that.
And we agree, but we also, I think we agree to it, but I'll say
Yeah.
I think we should expand the VA, right? Many people and civilians don't understand how the VA healthcare system works at all. It is not available to every veteran. It is available to certain groups of veterans before 9/11.
Yep. I agree with you. Medicare for all, like if you have Medicare for all, you should be able to choose whether you take the VA or another form of medical support that you need, right? Every single veteran should be able to go to the VA in theory, especially if everyone's being paid. Yeah.
And to lessen the burden on the overall healthcare system is if we capture all of the veterans, because we're only 6.2% of the population. If we capture all of us in the VA healthcare system, then we lessen the burden on the overall healthcare system, which is failing. And so that's just our idea. But when we talk about specialized care, right, and we talked about it a little bit, we didn't name it, should more research and funding be put toward moral injury, especially given how we fight wars in today's battlefield?
Yes, although in theory you shouldn't have to do moral injury if you're not committing war crimes. That's sort of one of the issues. But yeah, I think we need more research across the board, and we also need to go back to actually prioritizing education just in general. Because if you're not investing in education, then you're not investing in anything. That's really what it boils down to. I also think we need to do more research for women, like, for example, endometriosis and PCOS, because they're issues that affect so many people. And most people, especially men, have never even heard of them, let alone what they actually entail or how terrible or debilitating they can be. And most of our medical research is really like, okay, this seems accurate for a 20-year-old man in college, so it's probably good enough for a 40-year-old woman, right? Like that just doesn't make any sense. So we need to expand research across the board, and it also needs to be funded by the government. We should not be making kids go into endless debt in order to make our society better, especially when we have the ability to pay for it.
Yeah, I saw the comment from Lady Moore about as a reservist. That's surprising because I thought if you were, well, it's have not been able to use the VA. I wonder if you fall into one of those windows where veterans don't get care at the VA, and most people don't understand how that.
I think it might be that you don't have the disability rating. I think the VA requires a disability rating, and if you were only in the reserve, then you may not qualify. That might be.
Yeah, you can get a disability rating from a reserve standpoint, 100%.
Well, yeah, I'm curious to know too. I did not serve in the reserve, so I am ignorant. I'm willing to say that out loud.
And so one of the keeping on the healthcare at the VA, one of the great injustices that people don't talk about is MST survivors at the VA. It's not women. I'm actually not talking about women. Men in general cannot claim PTSD from MST at the VA for
Well, that's
disability.
wrong. That needs to be changed immediately.
It's 100% wrong because they classify it as hazing. And so that 100%, we need to change that immediately because that is such a falsity. And I think one of the reasons, I could be wrong, and this is me just a wild guess, is because then it would up the numbers to the real number that is reported by RAIN.
Yeah. Yeah. No one wants to look bad because of those numbers, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And so that is a extreme injustice that needs to be fixed. Also, the VA, like I go to, like I said, I go to a rural VA, but one of the things that I am not a huge fan of is community care. And
I'm not a fan of any attempt to privatize any form of our healthcare system.
Right?
I think Medicare Advantage is evil. I think community care is wrong. I mean, now one of the problems is that California has better healthcare than the majority of other states around the country. So we do have a situation where a lot of people here are like, I actually like community care because it's better for me, right? But once you start allowing private profit motives to be injected into veterans care, we turn into just numbers on a spreadsheet to be taken advantage of.
Getting medication at non-VA pharmacies as that is true. The VA is such an interesting microcosm for the larger system, right? And most people don't understand. Certain states have different policies when it comes to the VA, like state policies differ than federal policy when it comes to your healthcare and what your benefits are and what you'll receive. And so I think standardizing that across the board would make it easier. And when we're talking about community care, the only caveat I have for community care, right, is because community care is an attempt at privatizing the VA. It is draining the Veterans Health Administration of money, and people complain about the VA. Well, that's why, because the money is leaving the VA system to the private healthcare system.
Yeah. I think it was like Malcolm X who said something along the lines of, you can't, poke me in the eye and then yell at me for my blindness, right? That's what we've done with USPS. It's what they're trying to do with the VA. It's what they're trying to do with Medicare. And it's because of these wealthy ghouls who want to make money even when they shouldn't be allowed to. Like private prisons, for example. That's another good one. Or bad one, I guess you could say.
I think the only caveat is because of what I said earlier, is like rural VA systems are collapsing. And if they have no care, then they have to go to community care until we can reinstitute a better VA system within their area to take care of the needs. And so I do think community care comes in helpful in that aspect. I also think that when community care was created, it was created for a good reason. And it was created out of the fact that veterans were killing themselves in parking lots because they couldn't get a mental health appointment. And that's when community care came about. And so it helped, but did it though? Because
the road to hell is
veterans
paved with good
suicides are
intentions,
still
right?
at 22 a day.
Yeah.
The reason it was instituted was to help with veteran suicide rates, and they are no better today than they were when we started community care, and that was the mission. And so if it is not working, and the larger reason it's not working is because we don't have enough mental health care professionals in this country, not only in the VA system, but in the private healthcare system as well. And so it doesn't matter whether we have community care or not dealing with mental health, because it's an overburdened system. But if we're removing large swaths of money from the Veteran Health Administration, of course shit's going to fall apart.
100%. Yeah, I mean, part of the whole concept of Medicare for all from my policy platform perspective is not just having the single-payer universal healthcare system, but it also is in conjunction with making tuition free to the student and publicly funded by the government. And that way we can actually expand the workforce. Like, we need to expand our medical care workforce significantly. We don't have enough people. We have a silver tsunami coming where we're going to have we're basically like at inverted pyramid standpoint at this point already, like, Japan and other, developed economies. And the big problem is that right now they have also reduced the ability to get loans more than, I think it was like $200,000 or something. Now, in theory, you could say, oh, that means that they'll make tuition cheaper. But in practice, what that's going to mean is if you can't pay for it out of pocket or you can't get a private loan, then you just don't get to be a doctor, right? So we need to make the workforce bigger. We also need to pay people more because so many people leave the mental health system who are, psychiatrists or psychologists or what have you, because they're getting paid starvation wages. Same thing with social workers. So we have an upside down system in this country where the more beneficial what you do is to average everyday people, the less you get compensated for it. And the less helpful you are to everyday people, the more you get compensated for it. Everything is completely upside down, where, if what you're doing is good for a billionaire, you'll get paid really well. And if it's good for everyday people in your community, you'll get paid dirt. And we burn people out, we don't staff them enough, and then we complain about how there's not enough of them. So it's a policy decision, the fact that we have veteran suicides. It's a policy decision that the VA is underfunded and struggling, that community care also has veterans basically having the choice to kill themselves in a parking lot at a VA or at a private hospital, because we are just not putting our money where we should be and investing in the things that we need. So I think that, we need to expand the workforce and we need to focus on helping Americans. Like we said before, Americans first is the policy.
Oh, yeah. And I agree, expanding the workforce. And we'll caveat into that, but I wanted to ask you one thing about healthcare and PTSD research specifically.
Yeah.
So at the VA healthcare system, you can only get evidence-based therapies for PTSD. And most people don't understand what that means. But if it is not like cognitive behavioral therapy, cognitive dialectical therapy, EMDR, prolonged exposure, from this list of therapies that are evidence-based, then it's not offered. And so then you run into this problem where people have tried all of these therapies and there is nothing left. And we had a discussion about mental health in our general chat one day. And I did not realize that different VA healthcare systems offer talk therapy, whereas like mine does not.
I think so. Some of them offer exposure therapy too, don't they?
Mine does, prolonged exposure and
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that we need to expand, like we've talked about, our research on PTSD, because there is a lot of great research being done. It's just not mainstream of like what can be done. So
yeah, and it goes back to your discussion on moral injury. Like people who are doing good things generally don't get PTSD from it, just as a general rule, from at least my anecdotal layman's perspective, right? So I do think that if the evidence-based treatments are not working, then they should offer more experimental treatments. That's the whole point, right? Like the goal is to help veterans be healthy and to live happy, healthy, long lives where they have decent health and where they don't end up doing something that they can't take back. So I think we definitely need to expand those treatment options. I'm definitely a fan of evidence-based everything. I think empirical evidence is great, but when we have a situation where anti-vaxxers are now running the Health and Human Services Department, and we're basically going off of like, all right, I'm just going to inject you with whatever I'm making money off of directly myself. Like now evidence is in question, and we don't even know what we can trust at this point. So that's really terrifying. And yeah, but we definitely need to make it so that veterans can get the care that they need. And I'm going to do more for veterans than anyone else in my race because I'm the only one who actually served in the military. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're such a unique population. And so when we talk about, unique veteran issues is labor, right? And education.
Yes.
And I'm a builder.
What do you build?
So I build high schools. I build high schools.
Dang, that's cool.
And the housing crisis, right? It's not just unique to California. Like I said, I live in Florida. All around the country has a housing crisis and an affordability crisis. for housing, and it is affecting our generation, right? The three of us millennials more than anybody. I own a home, but most of my friends do not own homes.
Yep.
And so it is a problem when we are making more than our parents made at our age, and we cannot afford homes because it was part of that sold American dream to our generation to go to college, get a job, buy a house, have 2.1 kids, a white picket fence, and live life. So when we talk about the labor shortage, I always like to bring up my field, construction, because we talk about housing and everybody wants housing, but there's two unique challenges when it comes to housing affordability. And one is labor. So labor costs are on the rise because we're rounding up our workforce and deporting them, number one. And our generation as millennials were told to go to college and to not go into the trades. So there is a wide gap when it comes to the ages. So in the 2008 housing crash, a lot of institutional knowledge left the construction field. And then a lot of millennials did not join. Me and my older brother are both in the construction field, but a lot are not. And then you have fewer younger people joining the trades than ever. And there is such a gap coming. And the cost to have a plumber, an electrician, or anything at your house is going to skyrocket. I own a small business.
It's already skyrocketed. Like, I think we got our garage wired for a 220 volt at one point, and it cost like $6,000. Right? Like,
well,
yeah. But I mean, it's like that's a pretty mild example, but everything is getting more expensive, and the result is that fewer and fewer people are ever going to be able to afford a home. And it's a policy decision at this point.
It is, but I also think when we talk about education and veterans specifically, right? Because I run into a lot of veterans in the construction industry.
I know several. I know one of my buddies from West Point started his own construction company in Texas.
I mean, I'll be like, I'm pretty open book. I had to be around all men because of my mouth. I would get fired. So I am used to being in a male dominated environment. And so I went to another male dominated environment because it's just ingrained in me. But I think that we need to do a better job of promoting trade schools. And I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was such a lovely idea of community college being free for high schooler. I believe in education for all. I think an educated society is a good society. But if we don't get there, like one of the midpoints is if you graduate with I think it was like a 3.0 average, that you got community college free or a trade school. And I thought that was such a brilliant idea. I had heard it on a podcast and I wrote it down because we have such a trade shortage right now that when I try to explain I am a part of the ACE mentoring program. It's a national program where architects, construction professionals, and engineers, we mentor high school students that want to get into the industry. And I preach to them like, hey, just start your own business. Like, I know a buddy who owns a siding company, and all he does is put siding on houses, and he clears like $250,000 a year. Like, and that's all he does is put siding on houses. I'm a licensed plumber. I own a plumbing company, a small plumbing company. Like, it's like me and my brother and one other guy. It's very small. But my brother is older than I am. And he talks to me all the time about trying to get high school students into plumbing because during the pandemic, the most needed profession besides medical individuals was plumbers, was sanitation.
Well, it makes sense because everyone bought up all the toilet paper, they clogged toilets.
Well, no, and it was like the sanitation aspect. And so it was like because of a healthy society, and you'll get like dysentery and stuff like that. And so, I think we need to expand trade schools on a larger scale. right,
Yeah.
to affect the labor market within the construction industry, but industries in general, right? So the high school I just built has different CEP classes in it, and it's like avionics, and they have like a chef, and we built a bank into this high school. And I think expanding those type of programs within the high school system, and then letting them go to a trade school or wherever they choose if they do well in school, is a good caveat if we're not going to get education for all.
Yep. I mean, I agree with you. My goal is, free public trade schools and universities and colleges. I think community colleges provide amazing services to communities. A lot of the people that I've had the best interactions with since I've been running for office have been people who, work at community colleges or community college students, et cetera. So I definitely think that we need to do whatever we can to expand access to the trades, and we also just need more people to know that they exist. Because kids these days, they're not dumb, but they also are not exposed to a lot of the same things that we were exposed to, and as a result, a lot of them just don't have any representation. Like they like don't even know that electricians are a thing that they can be, for example, right?
Yeah.
So we absolutely need to expand the trades. And I think that the trades also need, we need to build more solidarity with other groups within like the labor movement and organized labor and stuff. But 100%, we need to improve education. We need to make sure that people know, like, it's not just college. It's not just get like a fast food job or a retail job or something. Going into the trades is good, but we can't make kids go into debt in order to do it in the first place, especially since they're critical and necessary for society to function. So really, it always boils down to that, like if you're providing a public service, you shouldn't have to invest in the system in order to do it. The system should be investing in you.
Yeah, I think so. I live in a right to work state, and he was kind of a boss. He's above me in the company. He was on my job site working, and he came from California. And I work for a very large commercial firm, and we are multinational and all over the United States. And he was telling me the difference of working in California and Florida is that he had to deal with the unions out there, not knowing that I grew up in a union household. And I am an advocate for a union. My dad was a letter carrier and a member of the National Association of Letter Carriers, and I grew up going to union meetings. And so I am a huge fan of unions, especially within the trades.
And it's the only way that normal people like us will ever have any form of power, when we have billionaires in existence at this point.
Absolutely. Like I believe in the trades movement.
Yeah. Millennials, we're like the biggest supporters of organized labor of like any generation, because we're like, we're getting screwed not having these things, right?
For sure. We're like, what?
Yeah.
But one question I always ask candidates that bring up education for all, because I think it is important to the veteran community, is a lot of us who use our GI Bill rely on the VAH. So how would you figure that? Because I lived on my BAH after I got out. It helped pay for my house. So how would you structure that with education for all?
So, I mean, education for all doesn't change the fact that veterans still have BAH benefits. It just means that the pool of money is going to be different. But on top of that, like, we build enough housing for everyone and we stop allowing housing to be a speculative asset for landlords to rip us off, then it's also not as big of a deal. And the problem with the housing situation is not the fact that we don't have enough houses, right? There's like 8 or 11 million vacant houses throughout the country. The problem is that they're all in places that have no jobs, no prospects, and people don't want to live there. So what we need to do is build houses in the places where people actually want to live. And generally speaking, that's the places where there are jobs. And generally speaking, there's not enough space there, which means you need to increase the actual density of those locales, right? So with veterans, like BAH should be something that they still get, I think, because, I thought BAH was pretty great. I was able to pay for my MBA out of pocket. I only had 40% of the GI Bill, but it was extremely helpful. It made it so I didn't have to take out student loan debt. And I mean, I don't think student loan debt should exist in the first place, but anything that we can do to support veterans, especially if we're taking veterans benefits and turning them into things that everyone benefits from, like we got to sweeten the deal somehow, right? But I absolutely think that BAH should be something that they keep getting, even with education for all. But also, we need to make it so that housing is not a privilege in the first place. So there's a lot we can do there, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like, so as a builder, I said this on last week's live with Jen Brothers, is I wrote a paper that was published on 3D printed houses when I was graduating with my degree in construction management. And we are way behind the 8 ball on 3D construction.
And prefab construction. Yeah.
So we're getting there in prefab construction, and I can say that because I started my path within this industry is I got out of the military, I started framing houses, and then I started doing siding and I built a house with my own 2 hands. The GC I worked for told me he couldn't pay me any more money and told me to use my GI Bill. And so I did that. And then I got into like multifamily, and now I do commercial construction, right?
Yeah.
But when you look at 3D printed construction and prefab, we are behind, especially when you talk about 3D printed houses.
Yeah, especially if you look at like what Europe is doing in China. Right?
Oh my God, it is amazing. And people don't know about it. Like all of the Nordic countries, it is pretty standard now.
Yeah, I know about, because one of my buddies from West Point, actually, he actually lives in Southern California, and he's working on building middle income multi-family housing units using prefabrication as the methodology, which is pretty cool.
And it's so worth it, right? And the 3D printed house, the problem with the profit, right? And we're talking about like billionaires and stuff like that. The overhead of the machine is $1 million plus. It's not over 2 million, but it is $1 million plus. Yeah. But when you 3D print a home, like a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom, 2,400 square foot home, I did all this research. Like you can build this out like with drywall and like top notch. I'm talking about like marble on the in your house for like $225,000. And if you're talking about low end, you could do it for like $125,000 or $95,000. And that can affect the affordability like crisis. But the problem is that whoever does this is not going to make a massive profit margin. You have to do it from an altruistic perspective.
No, we need public investment in housing. So the federal government should be investing in it. And also, I think we need a public housing development option, because we have a situation where a lot of developers are able to charge, whatever it is that they want to charge. And sometimes it doesn't make sense, especially if it's being paid for with tax dollars in the first place. And because most developers, especially in multifamily and single family dwellings, have realized is you make a lot more money if you build a luxury apartment that's half empty than you do if you build a low income housing unit that is completely full. So because they are unable or unwilling to meet that need, that's where the government's supposed to step in. That's literally the whole point of the government, right? We pool our resources so we can do the things that no individual would want to do for themselves. So I absolutely think there's so many things that we can do. And the only thing that's stopping us is the fact that almost every single politician is being controlled by the real estate, the development lobby, billionaires, even the trades to a certain extent, because sometimes the trades are also not aligned with what's good for society as a whole in terms of like trying to get jobs for themselves, right? Like we actually saw it over here. There's a project where they're going to be bulldozing a bunch of pristine California wildlands, including 3,400 old growth oak trees and vernal pools, to build a 35-year solar project. And the IBEW trade workers came out and said, we think this is a great idea, even though it's going to destroy a bunch of carbon sinks and it's terrible on every like scientific biological metric, right? So like we need to make it so that those types of situations don't happen. And that's why the federal government, like it's the money printer. Its whole purpose is to print money. And in theory, that could become a problem eventually, because we're alienating so many of our allies that we might no longer be the reserve currency. And so we might be beholden to the exact same economic forces as the rest of the world. But at least right now, we can definitely do it. It's a policy decision. So I think that's really cool, though, the idea of 3D printing houses. And I think I've seen videos of it. It's pretty cool,
It is. And China, so when I did this research paper, China has 3D printed a skyscraper. Like they're the
Yeah.
world's like premiere on it. And so I watched the video on it and it is intense.
Yeah, I mean, we demonize China not because of bad things that they do, but because it'll give Americans bad ideas that the people who control everything don't like.
The innovation in that field alone of
Oh,
like,
yeah.
because they have over 1 billion people, so they had to solve a housing crisis
Yeah,
cheaply.
and they also, there's no such thing as a ghost city in China either, right? They just build the city in advance and then people move in. So, yeah, that's really cool. I would love to read that paper. You should send it to me.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
I read people's PhD dissertations for fun because I'm a nerd.
Yeah, my ex has a PhD in communication, and hers is interesting. It's surrounding DEI and in the medical field, and so yeah, I mean the housing crisis is affecting everybody, right? And you did bring it up that we have more houses than we do homeless people, especially veterans, right? And one of the problems that we've seen, and we've talked about it numerous times, is like the money. And you look at like the BlackRocks and the investment companies that are buying up swaths of housing. And I know during it really wasn't a housing crisis, but when COVID happened and people were moving, like I was in the home building industry, and like 8 out of 10 houses I was building was for, like people not from Florida, but it was also not for them. It was for like an investment company. And so I would like to see policy capping that at like what they can own.
Yeah, I mean, I think that first and foremost, we need to build higher density multifamily dwellings in places where people actually want to live, and we need to build a lot of them fast, right? But on top of that, I also think we need to just outright ban foreign and corporate ownership of housing because it's a problematic incentive. Like you're turning it into a speculative asset, which means that now instead of it being a basic need that every human being has, we turn it into a profit-seeking motive. Now we have a situation where people are going homeless even though there's an empty apartment complex on the side of the road, right? Like that's something that we need to do, and I think the majority of people agree with it too. Everyone's like, yeah, we need to build more houses, but you tell them ban corporate, speculators from buying it and ban foreign speculators from buying it. I have yet to meet a single liberal or conservative person who disagrees with either of those points. The only people who would are the people who are making money off of it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I would like to see the divestment of corporations in the housing industry, because I think one of the other problems, and Florida is flirting. I mean, Florida, like, man, I'm a native.
Oh, Florida.
Well, I always say this to people, like Trump made America Florida, like welcome to our dystopian nightmare. Like we've been living it for the last 20 years of our lives. But Florida right now is trying to do away with property tax. And although it seems like a really good idea, and one of the things I worry about is like, not really my mom, but her friends who are on fixed income, and you see property taxes rising around the country and people are getting put out of their homes because they can't afford property tax anymore. And so it sounds like a good idea, but when we have such a housing crisis, right, and property taxes going away, like how are we going to fund society? And they are not going to replace it with anything. And so it's one of the things that I worry about on a national scale, because generally when you see policy come out of Florida, it goes to most of the red states. You're protected in California, but like it will probably spread to Texas at least first.
Yeah, Florida seems to be the bad idea incubator, huh?
Yeah. Like, oh man. So talking about education, right? Like let's talk about education for a second, about on a national scale. Is because education in Florida is getting really weird.
I think what is it that those weirdos who do the propaganda, Prager University, isn't that like accredited in Florida now or something?
Yes. Not only that, we have instituted in our school systems a Christian-based ideology.
That's a violation of the First Amendment.
It came out, I think, like 3 weeks ago now. And so I would like to hear your thoughts on the responsibility of the federal government.
Yeah, separation of church and state is part of
I
the
can step in
Constitution,
on that.
period. Yeah,
Like,
the First Amendment, it should be freedom from religion, freedom of religion. Practice whatever you want, but you can't enforce it on others with the government, especially. And I
okay,
also don't think that we should be giving tax exempt status to these people. Like it's being used as a way to basically launder and funnel political power in a way that violates basically every single ethical, moral, legal, constitutional standpoint. But then it's one of those things where it's like rules for thee, but not for me. So look at a Muslim, for example, situation where Muslims try to do the same thing and they'll get shut down by the IRS instantly. But then it's okay to have like a Christian nationalist theological situation in like a public high school. It doesn't make any sense. Now I was raised Christian, but I believe first and foremost in the First Amendment and the Constitution. Like I said, I'm a constitutionalist. I go by what are the principles that we say that we actually espouse? What is our system supposed to be built on? And that's the reason why we have the Bill of Rights. That's what the founders wanted. They didn't want the establishment of a religion in this country by the government. And that is just exactly what they should not be doing in the first place.
yeah, we see that with the rise of Christian nationalism around the country. And I grew up Catholic, conservative Catholic. I went to Catholic school my entire life.
Oh, I went to Catholic Children's Detention. Yeah.
Oh, fun. Yeah, so even like I am a non-practicing Catholic, but my Catholic family is very Catholic-y.
Yeah.
And so I worry about the political influence of Christian nationalism and what you were talking about funneling power and money through tax exempt status as well. And I would advocate for that to be taken away, but that is for a whole other conversation.
Hey, I'm all about systemic change, though, right? So.
Oh yeah. Like, and we do like we talk about systemic change, and we talk about Americans first,
Mhm.
right? Is we have a country that is not systemically built for everyday Americans. And if you look at the Constitution, and if we keep it as a constitutional conservative perspective, it was built sort of like for white men originally.
Yeah,
only.
white property owning men, right? Yeah.
But that's why we have the amendment process. And
Yeah.
I believe that we can structure the Constitution to be more equitable for everybody in society.
Yeah, that's how it was always supposed to be. It was supposed to be a living document that changes with the times. We have had far too few amendments over the last 150 years. Like
Yes.
that's just there's no question about it. And the whole idea of people being like, oh, let's build our entire ideology of the Constitution around what we think these dudes who died 250 years ago or whatever might have thought that it should have been like. It's like they didn't have the internet, they didn't have disease management technology, they didn't know anything about half of these things that are happening right now. It's like the absolute worst possible concept of not having age limits or term limits in Congress, right? Like that's basically what we're doing. We're saying let's go back to a time where people are literally incapable of changing with the times, and it's terrible. So yeah, we definitely need to amend the Constitution. One of the things I want to do is to end legalized slavery in this country, because we still have an exception for slavery when it comes to people who've been convicted of a crime. And as we know, what determines whether or not you've committed a crime is generally speaking whether or not there's a cop nearby. It's not based off of whether or not you're more dangerous than anyone else. It's based off of where enforcement actions are taking place. I also want to enshrine reproductive freedoms into the Constitution and LGBTQ protections. And I want to overturn Citizens United. Now, all of these things are things that require a significant majority in Congress to actually pass. But everything starts with a single individual, and then it builds from there into a movement, and then it turns into something that we can actually achieve. So it starts with us, but we're never going to accomplish anything if we just give up and say we can't accomplish it because it's so hard from the start. So that's the reason why I message what I want to accomplish on a systemic level, rather than talking about what I think I can compromise myself down to before the other side even opens their mouths.
And no, I think systemic change is needed, and it's done predominantly through policy. And that's why I am such a policy nerd.
Yep, both, absolutely.
Good policy is good policy. It doesn't matter who writes it. I don't care if it's out of the red camp or the blue camp or no camp, right? if it's good policy and it's for Americans, then I'm here for it. Or if it's to help an ally, I'm here for it. Or for somebody in need. But all right, so we are gonna try and wrap up. So what I want you to do is, I want to thank you for your time. It has been a very good time talking to you.
Yeah.
And I, jabbed at you for being a ring tapper, and I wasn't sure how this conversation was gonna go because I do see a Korean flag behind you. I was in
Yeah,
Korea.
that was from, I was in the 637 Field Artillery Regiment, multiple launch rocket system.
Yeah, I was on Yongseong.
Okay. So you had a better time than I did. I was at Camp Casey.
And Rory, where were you in Korea?
Humphreys.
Oh, Humphreys? Oh, you were also in Korea. Okay, nice.
Yeah. So yeah, I saw that. But so I want to thank you for your time. But I do want you to tell us, where's your next event? What are you doing? How do we donate to you? How do we connect to you and get involved and get people from California involved to help you out with your campaign?
Yeah, so our next event is actually our official campaign launch / town hall. It's going to be on January 11th in Folsom. You can go to tinyurl.com/Bennett for CA, BENNETTFORCA, in order to RSVP for that. I'm at Bennett for CA on all social media platforms, and my website is bennettforca.com. So, it's all about that consistent branding, I guess you could say. You can donate there. If you go to bennettforca.com/donate, it'll take you straight to our Act Blue donation page. And in terms of getting involved, you can actually sign up to be a volunteer at bennettforca.com/volunteer. And then you'll get an add into our WhatsApp volunteer group, and then you can support in a bunch of different ways. We're working on relational organizing because that's really the only way you'll ever be able to defeat infinite money and unscrupulous, corporate simps or whatever. But, there's going to be opportunities to do phone banking, to be doing text banking, to promote on social media, to build out content, all those kinds of things. So, we're going to need all the help that we can possibly get. But I think those are sort of the big pressing ones right now. But yeah,
I like it. So we do this twice a week now. You are our first one to open the new year. And so on Wednesday, the 7th, we will have Michael Kerwin. He is running in my district.
Ooh, nice.
In Florida, District 4. And so we will follow that up. And we close every live stream the same way. Chris, you will know exactly what is happening. For people that don't, we close it with a safety brief. Safety brief is normally happen at close of business on Fridays with troops because we are general degenerates during the weekends, and it is to remind us of things that we're not supposed to do. And so we do it the same way every time. We open it with, do not beat your spouse, your child, or your pet. Drink water. Take care of your mental health. And that means going to see your therapist and taking all of your meds that you're prescribed on time. Reach out before you crash out. You can always reach out to us through our social media. A few of us have access to every social.
Yeah, you can do that to me too. If you reach me on social media, I'm also available if anyone needs to talk as well.
Absolutely. And do not drink and drive. I am sober. I have been sober for over a decade. If you cannot afford an Uber, please message our page. I will personally pay for your Uber home to get you there safe. Random ones, do not buy a zoo animal off the black market and try to donate it to a zoo. Do not conduct live fire drills in housing developments. It is no longer the first of the year. Stop shooting fireworks in your neighborhoods. It is not kind, and your neighbors fucking hate you. I am one of those people. Please.
Can I have one? Don't use a vehicle without a muffler or an extremely loud motorbike after midnight.
It's a good one. And one of most things is for veterans. We took an oath to the Constitution and to the people of this country. So while we are out doing actions, protect the most vulnerable around you. That is our sole responsibility when we are out in the streets protesting with civilians, shoulder to shoulder, is we are trained to watch out for danger and to shield people. And so do that. If something breaks out, do that. And yeah, we all do know why exactly these are in the safety brief, because it has happened, right? And so I think it has been a very good time with you, and that is the end of our safety brief. Did I miss anything? Rory always lets me know.
No, I don't think so. No.
All right, so that is our end of our safety brief. Make sure that you are out there in the streets. I know that there are calls to action around the country today. It's 7 p.m. your time, it's 10 p.m. my time. There are calls to action around the country today and tomorrow in relation to the Venezuelan situation. So please attend those. Please be safe. And protect one another, because we keep us safe, right, in the streets. That is our goal. So we hope to see you next time on Wednesday with Michael Kerwin. And Chris, definitely connect with us. We will get you in the chats. We invite, just so everybody knows, our group is open to veterans, not only veterans. We have mil spouses and people that are connected to the military. And if you want to get involved, message the page. We'll get you tied in. And Chris, we always invite veteran candidates to get into our chat, because there are veterans around the country in that chat that are running in their own respective districts, and y'all can connect with each other and talk.
I would love to. What's another chat? I only have like 500 unread messages right now.
My guy, like I have never been in so many chats in my life.
I know.
I hate group chats, but
it's organizing, right?
It is. Yeah. But all right, everybody, I hope you have a wonderful new year. Chris, I wish you the best of luck. Please let us know how we can help you. We will get you tied in out there in California with some of the people we got. And yeah, be safe out there, guys.
Thanks so much, Katie and Rory. Thanks all.
Bye, guys.